Winter 2020.
Happy New Year's, guys.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I have a hunch that this is going to be an amazing year.
Let's hope. Spring 2020.
We have all our supplies. We're ready for however many weeks this pandemic has us shut in.
Same here. Hopefully it don't last but a few weeks. I think we're good for that.
Where the heck did you get toilet paper? I've looked everywhere. I have nothing.
Oh boy, sounds like you're in a crappy situation.
Summer 2020.
You all look ridiculous in those masks.
Why the heck aren't you wearing yours? The governor has mandated it.
I am not giving up my freedom for that tyrant. It's up to me. It's my choice.
Oh, so now you're pro-choice. That's just wonderful.
Oh, Stacy, you can't talk. You aren't even wearing it right. It's not a chin diaper. Pull that thing up. Mouth and nose.
If I do that, I can't breathe.
You'll get used to it. Pull it up.
Fall 2020. Well, it looks like the election is finally over. Thank God. We have a new president.
It's not over. Totally illegitimate election, voter fraud everywhere.
Where's the proof, Bowling? Where's the proof?
It's
Why are you saying that it's voter fraud? It's not voter fraud. It's not voter fraud. Present day 2021.
Appalachian Liturgy. Wake up.
Who was that?
You are Christians. You shouldn't be acting like this. You are a people of hope.
You know what, God? You are absolutely right. Guys, we need to get our act together and be people of hope again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what we do? Thanks, God, for that uplifting message.
I'm not God. Sorry. Let me clear my throat.
It's me. It's Nate.
Oh, hey, Nate. I knew that was you all along. I'm glad you could join us.
Wait, how did you talk to us before you joined the call?
Do life's greatest questions seem like a mystery? Well, we're probably going to talk about it here at Appalachian Liturgy. Important questions like, are you a Jedi or an Imperial? Is oatmeal actually a breakfast cereal? Is a Catholic weekday really called a ferial? Did you know that Mr. Rogers was Presbyterial? So join us as we have a little fun talking about thy kingdom come. Appalachian Liturgy.
Okay, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Appalachian Liturgy podcast. I am Justin Stacy.
I'm Brooke Ashley.
And I'm Justin Bowling.
And tonight we have a reoccurring guest, Pastor Nate Thomas. Nate, thank you so much for being on again.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. I would say to give introductions, but we've already done that. So everybody go back to episode 7, I believe, and you can find out about Nate.
That's right.
All right. So tonight we wanted to just, I guess, reflect on 2020 and try to find some hopeful things to take into this new year. And I also have maybe some articles to go through. But let's get started. What is some hopeful things that we can bring out of 2020?
Well, I had coffee today with someone outside of my immediate family, which hasn't happened in months and months and months. But one of the questions that I asked her, because we were talking about the church in general, is a question that I thought we ought to ask is, what have we found that we couldn't do in 2020 that we don't miss?
That's a good question. Yeah.
That's interesting.
She and I came up with all kinds of things that we didn't miss. Like, we didn't miss having to travel so much for work. Like, and not like overnight travel, but just traveling, an hour and a half for a meeting and an hour and a half back or whatever. That was one of the things that we found that we haven't missed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't miss. So when we first started like working from home permanently, I was missing going to the office and seeing everyone. And I think I'm used to not seeing people now because I'm finding it less and less that I crave to go back to the office. So, and I know Bowling, you've worked from home more than me over the past couple of years. But I wouldn't mind if this becomes semi-permanent, honestly.
I do miss the human interaction part of it for sure, but yeah, it's easy to kind of get in the swing of things, and I feel like I am more, personally productive in my work-life balance once I got the hang of it, because it's easy to not turn off work mode if you're working from home a lot. But once you get the hang of it, it's kind of easy to it's nice to balance that. On a more mundane thing that I don't miss, it is the fact that like grocery pickup and pickup in general has absolutely picked up, because oh my goodness, taking 4 kids into a grocery store is not my favorite thing in the world, or taking them into a restaurant. If I can sit outside and have somebody bring the stuff out to me and bring it back home and not have my kids yelling at people, it's a pretty good day.
Yeah, one of the things that my fear with being just working remote all the time is that, it's okay right now, I think, because we have relationships with the people that we're still interacting with.
Yeah.
But what happens as work cycle people take different positions and
that's a good point.
Have that relationship, and then all of a sudden you're just a 2D image, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my only fear about it. But Zoom has been awesome, because like I would have to go to the conference office, which was 3.5 hours away, and I would go for 3.5 hours for an hour-and-a-half meeting and 3.5 hours back. That was my entire workday. Sure. So, but again, those are people I have a relationship with already.
Yeah.
And what happens as that changes? How do we do that?
Yeah. I think for the most part, everyone that I was really close with, I've kept up with. So, but it takes effort when you're secluded. It takes a lot more effort than if you were going to see them every day.
And I echo the grocery pickup.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's going to stay because it's productive for them to do. But I've definitely used it, and it's great.
And it helps my budget, because I'm not. There at the end, would you like this? Every now and then I click. But for the most part, it's just the stuff that I need.
Yeah, I'm not forced, or I don't force myself to go down the electronics aisle and see if I need anything.
Or as you're checking out, ooh,
yeah. Ooh, piece of candy. What about you, Nate? Have you thought about anything?
I really like to be around people. So like back in March when we first started, the first round. I'm so sorry. Come on. When we first started quarantine,
have another guest.
I was home for about 7 days in a row, and by the end of the 7th day, I was like, I just need to go somewhere. The store, the church, something. I'm not good in isolation. A few days is nice.
Yeah.
But then I found that I wasn't as productive. And even now, our church has been mostly virtual. Mm-hmm. I still find that I need to go to the church office.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner from where I live. And the secretary might be there, the youth minister might be there, the organist might be there working. But I just need that interaction with people. And like, we have some church people who we haven't seen them at all since March.
Mm-hmm.
And you call them, but you can't go visit them.
Yeah.
And they don't really want you to, because they're worried about being sick too, which I respect, and we should all be concerned about that. But it's hard, and I know I said before, I know I'm not the only one, but I felt so unequipped for this. I'm sure that's not a revolutionary statement, but I don't think anybody expected it to ever come to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that I've missed being around people. I've not missed meetings.
Yeah.
We went about 5 months and didn't have a board meeting at the church, and I hope none of the people are listening to this podcast, but that was nice.
That was on my list of things that I didn't miss. I didn't miss meetings that could have been an email.
Yes.
I think so often we had meetings when it could have just been an email discourse back and forth.
Yeah.
So that I appreciated. And so I could just call those, fluff meetings.
Yes.
meetings because we're supposed to, we don't really have an agenda.
Yeah.
So
I like that more people are interacting this way with Zoom and other technologies
Yes.
instead of doing just text or messenger or whatever, because this isn't the same as being in person, but it's as close as you can get.
It's
And
worlds
it's
better than just some text. Yeah.
worlds better than text. You can have good conversations, civil conversations on a platform like this because you're seeing the interaction and the facial reactions to people when you say things. So you're going to be
I agree.
you're going to be thinking about what you say, whereas online you're not. You're shielded by your computer wall.
well, one of the follow-up questions that we talked about today was, what is something that we started doing in 2020 that we hope to continue doing after the pandemic is lifted?
One other thing that kind of fits in both those categories that when you mentioned that was I saw somebody posting a meme like it said something like, "Do we really in the before times used to go to a bowling alley, stick 3 fingers in this dirty ball that everybody else used to touch, come back, eat buffalo wings, and then go do it again," or something like that?
Yep.
And it's kind of a joke, but it also is kind of serious that I definitely fit in that category that I didn't take
Nope.
public cleanliness, I guess, is I don't know if that's the right word, but like I wasn't a germaphobe, but now I'm definitely more cognizant of stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a global response from this, in that everybody is going to be more cognizant of public health, and I think for myself, I'm going to be a germaphobe going forward. I really do. I can see myself being a Sheldon Cooper now. Because that's the way I've been for most of this year. I wash my hands 100 times a day, and I'm all, even the mask. Like, I'm wondering, like, if I get sick going forward, if I have the flu or whatever, I think I'm going to be wearing a mask. Like, I think that's the proper thing to do now.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to. Is like I feel like that would be a decent response if people were more serious about when they're sick. If the grocery store wipes off buggies or has things for you to wipe them down, just even small things like that. I really like it too. Yeah.
Well, that is something that I think going forward, I hope that we keep, is the permission to let people be sick and not feel like they have to work through being sick. And I don't know how many times, even my own self, I've gone and, powered through because I needed to do it. And this idea of, of course, if it was a stomach virus or something, that was different, but I don't know how many times I've preached with this really bad cold. I mean, I should have been home, and took precautions not to be around people, but still just said, by golly, I'm supposed to do that today, and come hell or high water, I'm going to get it done,
Right.
So, and I love the fact that we appreciated jobs that we didn't think about before. I like that. But something that I hope to continue that I started in 2020, because I just had more time, was some more self-care things. And this is going to sound very girly. So I'm the girly and the girl in the girl group. But I started taking baths again, not just to get clean, but to like relax. And we've become huge hot chocolate drinkers. And I love that we drink hot chocolate or something. So those are things that I hope that I can continue, just help with some of those boundaries.
Yeah. So something that I started really as soon as the pandemic hit and we all got quarantined is doing some of the daily offices. And it helps that St. Thomas, they do the Tuesday morning and then Thursday morning. Father Boyd, he hosts the morning daily office for that. And now it is around 8:00, 8:30, so most of the time I'm asleep during that time, so I'll wait till I get up to actually watch it. But
my daily office comes at 8 p.m. and sometimes I'm asleep too.
Well, there you go.
Another thing that I hope doesn't go away: telehealth visits.
Oh yeah.
Okay?
I am a big fan of telehealth visits.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I understand we still got to go in and be checked, but you know, I'm a middle-aged woman and I know if I have a sinus infection or not. I've had enough of them in my life, you know. So I love being able to call in and in 3 minutes, I'm like, know that I'm on my way to health.
Mm.
So I know I've had a chance to think about this today more than y'all.
No, I was going to actually even repeat yourself, self-care as well. That's something I kind of hope, not necessarily in the bath way, although I do like a good bath and I'm not afraid to admit that. But I was going to say in terms of like exercising and stuff, because I've done a lot better with that type of stuff this year. At the start of the pandemic, I did the exact opposite. I was at home, not doing anything. And I put on the COVID-19, as they like to say. And
I've not heard that.
but
That's
yeah,
pretty good.
after that, you did actually get into a good habit for the first time in many, many years and have kept it up so far. So I'm hoping to keep that going in the next year.
Yeah. To piggyback off that, this is the first year that I've been able to really keep a successful diet for more than 2 weeks. And I was able to do it for at least 2 months. And in those 2 months, I dropped 25 pounds. And
Nice.
I did lapse because of Thanksgiving. I said, you know, I'm going to eat good for Thanksgiving and then jump back on. Well, that didn't happen because then I was thinking in my head, I've got more holidays coming up. I might as well wait to the first of the year.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I did. I ended up putting about 5 or 6 pounds back on during that time. But I'm still in much better shape than I was. And I'm back on my diet. And this week I've been on the diet and I've really had no problem. You know, it's a low carb diet and I can eat and not be hungry. And that's always been my issue. So I don't know that 2020 had a lot to do with it, but I guess just being inside and
Yeah, I think it probably did. Honestly,
Yeah.
getting rid of distractions and other stuff that
Yeah.
you it's easy to use as an excuse to not do anything.
So we kind of had the opposite. We were doing really well. We'd been about 2.5 years of just eating super healthy and dropping weight and all this kind of stuff. And COVID hit and ice cream became our refuge.
Mm.
And there was one time that I went to the store and no joke, I was embarrassed at the number of cartons of ice cream that I'd bought. It was on sale, you know, so I stocked up, but there were 3 of us at the house and we were eating ice cream every night and we were we were going through the cartons of ice cream. So we've pulled back a little bit,
Yeah.
but so we kind of did the opposite. So we've got to get back on it. So the other question that we talked about, and this was a church colleague of mine that we're having this conversation. We asked the question, what have we found that nourishes our soul? Because the way that we were used to worshiping got pulled away, and we had to find other ways to care for our souls, to connect with God, to spend time in worship. So it was what have we done? What have we discovered about ourselves in this process that maybe surprised us, or how have we connected with God when normal ways that we would have done that have kind of been taken away? So I'm curious to hear what you all have to say about that.
Nate, you want to go first on that?
Well, I can't speak for anybody else, of course. For me, I was in such a routine of you get up in the morning, you get ready, you go to the church, you work on Sunday, you work on Wednesday night, depending on what time of the week it was. You work on, we have a monthly newsletter, you work on some of that. You make phone calls, you visit, whatever. You know the routine, whether you're in the ministry or not. I found that spiritually, it sounds awful. I feel like now it was a checklist. I've got to work on the sermon today. Got to get my notes in. Got to get that stuff for the newsletter. It's Wednesday. Got to make sure the fellowship hall's set up for Bible study. So for me, having less structure made me be more intentional. Like I'm here at the house, I get up in the morning. I do like to watch TV, but I make myself turn the TV off, sit down and read my Bible. I set up a desk in the hallway of my house. There's like a desk cut out. It's an older house, so you know how people used to do those things. And so I've got my Bible and my notebook and my computer here. So when I'm sitting here, I can't see a TV. So it's intentional, and that has helped me. to draw closer, and I feel like to be more obedient. It's less of a checklist, more of an opportunity, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do feel like this is an area where I definitely feel like there's a big hole that I'm waiting to be fixed, to filled. Like for the first few months, there was no Sunday Mass at all. And then we did pick that up. And so we do have that going now, which feels a lot better. But there's basically no other events happening. So, the young adult ministry or any other RCA stuff that we were involved in, Sunday school is still not happening and doesn't seem to be for the foreseeable future. So it definitely feels like things, community gatherings with people within your church community is still a hole missing. What I've found helps a little bit is I've definitely increased like readings that I've done, like in terms of spiritual readings or even daily Bible readings. I've done a better job of that here recently than I did when everything else was going on. But yeah, I and try to do Bible studies online, which doesn't have the same type of feeling, but it's kind of been a way to kind of fill some of the gap. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest holes that I feel still I'm waiting to be filled.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do miss, like, I went one time after the pandemic started, and that was for technically a class with instructed Eucharist, but we did have communion during that. So it felt like a Sunday service type thing. But that was the only time that I've actually been since this entire thing started. So I feel that there's a big hole there because of that. What I filled it with, though, is I feel like this year I have prayed more than I ever have. I feel like 2020 gave us lots of reasons we would need to pray. So I have prayed more, and like I said, I've been trying to do the daily office at least once a week. Reading scripture. So I subscribe to the daily devotional that Scott Gittani has. And so, I try to read that in the mornings. There's scripture and there's a little prayer and the blurb that he always provides. And those are pretty good. So I try to read those. But honestly, I think the pandemic, for me, the big thing spiritually, the pandemic opened the door for this podcast. And this would not have started if I hadn't got a free time. If I hadn't, because before I was doing the same type of things. I was working full time, but all my free time and all my hobbies was focused primarily on board gaming. And that was it. I was thinking about the next board game event. And then even after work, we would do board games 2 or 3 times a week. Like, it was literally consuming me, and I didn't realize it. Someone who did realize it and told me often was Renee. We would get into heated conversations about my board gaming. She's like, "You're getting addicted," and I'm like, "No." I was like, I would say it was like something to relax me after work or something. I would just make up whatever excuse. But she was absolutely right. Like, I was getting, and I have that.
Quit anytime you want it.
Yeah, just not now. Anytime I want, just not right now.
Not now. I need it today.
Right. And I feel like I have an addictive personality. I do tend to, when I get into a hobby, I dive into it really, really deep, and it starts consuming me. And then it's like all of my free time goes to that. So I think being able to take a step back and get free time to do this podcast, to also do like EFM, which is Education for Ministry, and also do the Episcopal Watt class, which is the class for confirmation. Doing those things has helped me grow spiritually, and I've become more patient, and I feel less like I need to play something, because I'm doing productive things that is fulfilling that same itch that I was trying to get with playing games. Now, I will say the part that I miss about playing games is just being face to face and socializing with people. That's the part I miss. Like, you could also just take the game part out and just let me sit around with people and talk or something. But that is how I've grown this year, and it has made me reevaluate going forward when things get back to normal, whenever that is, how much I really want to invest in that type of thing.
So for me, and this is kind of where this episode of the podcast came from. It made me re-examine some of the religious platitudes that I think that we just gave lip service to as the church. And one of those was, especially, I was already thinking about this, but as we got closer and closer to Advent, and I'd really found myself saying some of this early on when we got through that first wave, because my personality was, man, all we got to do, we got this, no big deal. We'll make the best of it. By July, we'll be back up and running. No big deal. That's just kind of who I am and the way my personality works. July hit. Of course, we moved during that period of time as well. And about mid-July, it was like, oh, this isn't going away. Like, our numbers started climbing. And then I started looking at the trends and realizing that we were in it for the long haul. So I had a couple of weeks of just kind of feeling sorry for myself and for everything. And then I started thinking about all the things that I tell people in my line of work. We're people of hope. Well, why are we people of hope? Well, we're people of peace. Well, why are we people? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. So we're people of hope. And what does that look like? What does it look like to be a person of hope? What does it look like to be a person of peace? What does it look like to be a person of joy? And what does it look like to love people when you have to be super intentional about it? So for me, I had to do a lot of soul searching, and part of that too, people were asking me, as a follower of Christ, how do I deal with this? And I'm struggling with that myself, learning all the new skills and being in front of the camera constantly, which was huge, having to watch myself preach all the time. Oh my gosh, but yeah, so how do we be people of hope? Why is that so important? And realizing that, and I'd been saying it for years, that we were missing the mark as the church, that we weren't communicating things to society that we needed to be. We were condemning them for actions, but not giving them anything to hope in, and so for me, it was really working through all of that. And that is something that, looking back, I think I'm going to be eternally grateful for. And part of the conversation today that we were having in our 3-hour coffee date was, how do we help move the church forward in that? How do we, how do we learn from 2020 and apply that to moving forward as the church? And I think there's a lot of lessons that we needed to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Nate. No, you go ahead.
That's my apologies. I think we'll find in our churches, and I know Episcopal, Catholic, Methodist, is that right, on everybody's denomination?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm with Disciples of Christ. All four are traditional. All four have a lot of traditions. And all four had to change a lot of those traditions in 2020. Not change them, but modify them. That would be more fair. My hope is that moving forward, we'll look at why we have those traditions. Like, I don't know, an Ash Wednesday service. Well, we always have one. Okay. Well, let's look at why. Well, we always have a Monday, Thursday service. Well, why? Well, we take communion every Sunday. Okay.
Wow.
Why? And that makes it tradition. There's nothing wrong with tradition. But tradition for the sake of tradition is silly. Tradition for the sake of a purpose. And I think, because we've missed so much, we didn't have a Christmas Eve service. We didn't have a Monday, Thursday service, a sunrise service. I think we will appreciate those things, not because they are things to do, but because they have such meaning for us. At least that's my hope and my prayer.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like, I would hope that everyone would question, why is it that we're doing these traditions,
Right.
and want to understand it. And maybe there should be emphasis on the churches to make sure that the congregations know, maybe before, like a Monday, Thursday service, during the service itself or before the service, be like, here is why we do it. Here's when it began.
Right.
Here is why we do it. This is what we're celebrating. It's not just something we do because it's something we do.
It's not because it's fun, because let me tell you, it's not fun to plan all those extra services.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I came out of a denomination before I took the church I'm in. We didn't do any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do communion every Sunday. You kind of do it when you want to do it. We didn't do Ash Wednesday, Monday, Thursday, maybe a sunrise service, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, Thanksgiving service, whatever. We didn't have all of that. So just the church that I'm with, well, why do we do that? I've had to figure that out over the couple of years.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm not the only one, and I'm kind of new to the church.
Yep.
For me, when you talked about this being like an episode about hope in 2021, it reminds me of my favorite encyclical from Pope Benedict, which I probably brought up before and I'll probably bring up again because it's my favorite, but it's Spe Salvi, which means in hope we are saved. So he's quoting from Romans 8, where it talks about in all things God works for the good. And it talks about that's where Paul mentions from this hope we're saved. And the idea that kind of runs through that whole letter is that hope is performative. And hope's performative because it allows us to focus on the present because we're secure in the future. Mm-hmm. And so because we know how things are going to turn out in a way, we know that God's going to somehow turn this for the good. It allows us to actually perform our Christian duties. And that can shine through in some of the worst times. The story that's told again in that letter is of an African saint, Josephine Bakita, I think. I probably mispronounced that or something, but I'm sorry. But it talks, she was somebody who was stuck in the slave trade in a lot of early Africa. And how her hope shines through and becomes a witness and allows her to push forward because she's always has hope in the promises of Christ. And that's, I think, what we can do in 2021. Like, we're not in that type of situation, but we are in a situation to where our life's been upended in a lot of ways, and we can use our hope to still, perform our Christian duties.
Yep.
Yeah, and I love the fact that the pandemic and all the other stuff that's gone on in 2020.
Right.
Not just the pandemic, but a lot of the other stuff has given me the opportunity to talk about how God doesn't necessarily orchestrate the bad things that happen in our lives, but that God can use that for good. And,
Right.
And that has been a blessing to be able to have that conversation across the whole, so I also think 2020 has taught the church how we don't want to be.
Yep.
What we don't want to be about, what of the things that we were doing, what brought life, what brought joy, what brought fruit, what didn't.
Yeah.
And my prayer is that as we examine that and look at that, not that, tomorrow the pandemic's going to be over, but eventually we're going to be coming out on the other side.
Right.
What do we bring back? What never comes back? And how, as people of hope and as people who understand connection, we understand that we are connected to God and that we are connected to one another because of our connection to God. How do we help people outside of our faith answer the questions that they're having about connection? And
Yes.
How do we help them fill those voids in their lives with positive connection and enable them to know a loving God through Jesus Christ? And I think those are questions we need to be asking ourselves now so that we're prepared when we get there.
Yeah. What scripture that it reminds me of for really 2020, revealing really the sin that the church has been accompanied to, and corrupted by, that we may have not known or seen, but it has, either the pandemic or the politics has revealed these things. And, I look to Romans 7 when Paul is talking about the law, and he says that should we view the law as sin, or should we view the law as revealing our sin? The purpose of the law is to reveal our sin. And I'm to the point where I believe this, that the purpose of these things that happened in 2020 was to reveal the sin that we are taking part of. And like you said, Brooke, I hope that we've learned a lesson, and I hope that the church looks quite a bit different going forward and isn't so complacent with being okay with the types of things that we've seen in 2020, because it's been insane at some of the lack of compassion, lack of care, and the hate in politics that we've seen.
Or just in general. I mean, I would go as far to say the hate and the ugliness just in everyday conversations about stuff, whether it's, hoarding toilet paper without thinking about,
Yeah.
somebody else needing that. And,
Yep.
During the pandemic, so Aaron and I were empty nesters. And so we had early, in 2020, had gone to Sam's and bought a big pack of toilet paper. Well, for two people, those big packs of toilet paper can last quite a while.
Yep.
And so we weren't doing the rushing out. And, I know it's very simplistic, but we just kind of felt like we were going to be okay. Like when we needed toilet paper, we were going to find toilet paper.
Yeah.
So we didn't have this panic about it. That was easy to do because there were just two of us. And I get all of that. But that lesson then it came in a lot of different ways through that, so we couldn't find our favorite whatever. Well, does it really matter if we can't find our favorite ketchup, because it's not on? So, I mean, I think just some of that got put into perspective.
There was a lot of fear that, people protect in at the start of it, at least.
Can you be people of hope and also be people of fear?
I don't think you
Not
can.
fear.
They seem to be opposite.
Do not be afraid is a quite common theme. If you
Yeah. Isn't it one of the most common words?
there's some kind of stat like that, and I couldn't remember it exactly, so I just went for very.
Do not be afraid.
Not
Yeah.
repeated over and over in the Bible.
Yeah.
See, and I think, though, we have to be really careful as the church when we talk about do not fear, that then people feel guilty if they have fear or they are anxious. And I think we saw one of the issues with the pandemic was mental health, and we saw people needing to reach out to that. So I want to make sure that people understand that when, as Christians, we say do not be afraid, we don't mean do stupid stuff, right?
Yeah.
We mean have hope.
Right. Don't be afraid of things that you need to be fearful of, and we're not condemning people for when they are afraid.
Right. It's natural to be afraid, and everybody gets afraid.
And fear not. Now, this is just my belief. I'm not a Greek scholar. I think it's in an eternal sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know the end result is going to be fine, but today, I'm not so sure about today. And that's why I look. I had surgery in July, and there's a million people standing around you, and the surgeon comes in and he says, "How do you feel?" And I was like, "I'm scared to death." Yeah, which was just bluntly honest. And he said, "Well, I'm going to take care of you." And I said, "I don't have a choice but to trust you. I'm just telling you that's how I feel." Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't worried that I was going to go to sleep and wake up in eternity.
Right.
I mean, I'm not worried about that. I believe in that hope. But in that moment, I was afraid. I hope that's not a terrible example.
No, and I think, one of the things that I told my kids for years is it's okay to be afraid, but it is not okay to let fear rule you.
Right.
So it's not
Bingo.
okay to not do stuff because you're afraid, unless, Abby, if you're listening, you don't rappel out of your second story window. Okay. That's a healthy thing. Just
There
saying.
you go.
Just saying. But, and I think, when we see that in the scriptures, that is an affirmation of you do not be afraid doesn't mean you shouldn't feel a certain way. It means you can't let that paralyze you.
Yeah.
That God is with you, And that's where that do not be afraid is. And I think that one of the things that has been so real to me throughout this pandemic is that God is with us. Which made Advent so meaningful this year, is thinking about how God was with us when we were afraid about running out of toilet paper, or,
Right.
We've been afraid that the fear is not that that you are alone, that God is with you, and that because of that, we can continue on. So, for Pete's sakes, we moved.
I think
There was fear in that.
I think one of the things in terms of fear, and I don't know if you would call this fear, but you can look at Christ, and when he was being crucified, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In some sense, that's a level of being afraid, and that's a human moment. And if
Yep.
Jesus can have that human moment, we can all have that human moment like that. It's a natural thing to feel sometimes empty, sometimes distant, sometimes lost. Just you have to have that eternal hope, back to the hope message, that will get you past it. And I think one of the things I've seen used quite often this past year, was people was saying, "Oh, I'm not afraid. I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid, so I'm not going to wear a mask." Well, that's just, number one, that's just being careless. It doesn't matter if you're not afraid. It's being careless. You're not caring for yourself or others when you do that.
That's why I go play in the 4-lane.
Yeah. What I came back with that was, Jesus gave us a great example. And, as followers of Christ, we can't argue with Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus is kind of the way.
Yeah.
It is the way.
He's the ultimate authority. Yeah.
But you could look at it like that if you wanted to.
And Jesus, when tempted,
Yep.
when Satan said, "Throw yourself down and nothing's going to happen to you," Jesus said,
"Nope.
I'm we should not tempt our God."
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I came back to that.
Yep.
And I just the things that we could have learned. But I do think that it's so important for those that are followers of Christ to be transparent when we are feeling fear, to share that, but to have that affirmation that God is with us, and to share that, because I think when you tell me that you were afraid but God was with you, it reminds me when I'm afraid God is with me, and vice versa. And we've had to figure out how to live that out because we're not seeing each other in person. And so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
It's slightly better than 2 cents. I'll give you a nickel for it.
Okay, nickel.
No, it was really good.
Oh, that's good stuff. Well, I think we've actually found some hopeful messages from the dumpster fire. So I think we succeeded in that. I would like, just for a minute, for us to maybe give a hopeful message for 2021 in light of what just happened this week.
Yeah.
How do we Christians respond to what we've seen, especially with people who was doing the violent protesting at the Capitol using Jesus flags?
So I know Brooke has thoughts on this. I'm gonna get mine out of the way really quick so that you could go. Yeah. Yesterday's mass readings were from 1 John, and then it was saying that if anyone says, "I love God," but hates his brother, he is a liar. For whoever does not love a brother he has seen cannot love God, who him he has not seen. And I think that fit pretty well into some of the problems with trying to espouse Jesus in a violent attack on your brother. So if we focus on the loving our brother part, we'll see where we have missed some stuff here.
Yeah. Bowling's referring to a Facebook post that I made the night of
Really good.
the whatever You know, and it struck me as I was watching, and you know, you had these Jesus 2020 flags. You had an image of somebody with a Jesus flag, you know, taunting law enforcement folks. You had there was one image of a noose hanging in a gallows, and somebody with a Jesus shirt on near that. And you know, my thought was, I don't know the Jesus that they're talking about, that they're representing. And you know, the cool thing about America is you have the freedom to say what you want, but you don't have the freedom from the consequences of that. And I think that we've forgotten that a little bit, that I have the right to say whatever I want, but there could be consequences to that. And I think that not to be cheesy or churchy, but there are some eternal consequences to what we say and how we present Jesus. And when we think about the term Christian being little Christ, and was actually a derogatory term used in first century towards followers of Christ, or third century, probably more like it. And the church said, oh, we kind of like this. Like, that's really what we're trying to be, little churches, or little Christ. You know, it just dawned on it, you know, and I've thought about this a lot, that it wasn't that Jesus never got angry and that Jesus didn't have harsh things to say. But if you really look at Jesus's teaching, his harsh teachings were for the people in the church, in the synagogue, the people who held up and said, I am a religious teacher, I am a religious leader. And so my heart was broken that night as I saw that. And I really started thinking about, you know, folks outside the church who maybe thought that all of us that claim to be Christian acted this way.
Yeah.
And you know, throughout history, there have been atrocious acts done in the name of God and in the name of the church, in the name of Christ.
Yep.
But the church has survived because that's not who the church is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think if anything, what I want people to understand is the church is big enough to love people who even do stuff like that. And that is not easy. You know, that is not easy. The other thought that I had with that, we just did a Remember Our Baptism service last week at church. And part of the United Methodist liturgy with that is, do you accept the power that God gives you to resist evil, injustice, oppression? You know, that's part of that. But there's also in there, do you put your trust wholly in Jesus Christ? And at first, my initial reaction was, we've got to resist this evil, you know, this concept of the Jesus that they're putting out there. But then I really started thinking about those baptismal vows, and I wondered if it wasn't more about, where do we put our trust? You know, are we putting our trust in a particular party, a political party, or a particular leader, or even a particular country? Like, where of we of Christians, where are we putting our trust? You know, and it was a long night wrestling with that, and knowing that as a pastor, I'm responsible to love all those that I come into contact with, even folks who are doing things like waving a Jesus flag under a gallows. You know, how do I do that? What does that look like?
Yeah.
That was a much longer answer than you probably wanted, but
no, that was perfect. Do you have any final thoughts on that, Nate?
Well, my thing is this. I have seen people that I know and am well acquainted with on both sides of the issue on social media, which is not always the best judge. But I've seen people talk about, I can't believe what we've seen, this is awful. And I've seen people that I have previously had a lot of respect for say, I wish I had been there.
Yeah.
This is what needs to happen. And I'm really struggling with reconciling that with two congregations.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
because I do love these people. I do enjoy these people. And I do believe, like I said, that the things that unite us have got to be bigger than the things that separate us. I'm struggling with that. Like, is it my responsibility as the pastor to address it from the pulpit? And I don't believe that it's my job to politicize from the pulpit, but you're seeing spiritual issues.
Yep.
You know, when people are condoning violence, I have a hard time saying, okay, but how can you, and I'm not saying this has happened, but how can you serve as a deacon? How can you be a Sunday school teacher?
Mm-hmm.
And this is, you're showing who you really are. Now listen, none of us are perfect. Don't misunderstand me. I'm having a hard time reconciling that.
Yeah.
And I think too, the thing that the correlation that I've been told by some folks, you know, they point back to Jesus flipping the tables. And what I'm going back to is Jesus flipped the tables in a synagogue because the vendors were price gouging folks who were trying to repent and make sacrifices to God for their salvation.
Jesus had righteous anger, not I didn't get my way anger.
That's different than going into a government place and flipping tables.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key issue here is that wasn't a church. You know, that doesn't have to do with our salvation. Government, yes, and we can disagree and all that kind of stuff, but it's different. Even though that's, you know, I won't call it a sacred place, but it's a place of importance.
It is.
You know, it is a place of importance. It's a symbolic importance as well, but it is still not the same thing as Jesus flipping the tables over.
Well, and if they think that it is, then where's the idol? It's that building.
Yeah. I mean, that was my first, that's been my thought for a while, obviously, is that this is an idol now. Like we have our political leaders have become idols and we are worshiping them. And I think when you have someone who's president that loves marketing and loves to put his name on everything, has flags, because flags is a symbol. And once you get a symbol, it's really easy to turn that into an idol. That's, you know, I think that's why we see the Confederate flag everywhere still. It's an idol. I was just very saddened, angered. The other day, I really was. I'm glad that I cooled off for a couple of days. My hope in all of this is that I know, Nate, you said that you didn't want to politicize from the pulpit, but my hope is that the church as a whole in America will wake up, and it doesn't have to be from the pulpit, but in the relationships you have with church leaders, just all church leaders, the relationships you have with your congregations, you speak truth to them, whether it be from the pulpit or whether it be on social media or whether it be
speak truth regardless.
Exactly, speak truth regardless, because I do believe that church leaders are held to a high standard biblically, you know, right? So that would be my only point, that speak truth. And if there's negative consequences, then people would just leave the church. And I think we would have to be okay with that
I'm going to push back a little bit on you, Stacy.
Okay.
Thank you. You go first.
So yes, as the pastor and the person who's proclaiming the word on Sunday morning, I have an obligation to proclaim the word. But I think we have to be super careful that we don't cherry pick scripture to back our own belief. So, and I'm always leery about pastors who change their sermons because of current events. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't address it, that we don't have a special time of prayer, of repentance, and acknowledge the pain and the hurt. But to change my sermon, there have been very few times that I have felt that something rose to that occasion. And because I don't want the secular world to influence my reading of scripture.
Yeah.
So I agree with you in that we need to address it as the church, but I would be if I went into a church and the pastor completely preached on that, I would have some red flags about what was going on.
Yeah,
That's not exactly what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think she was
meant-
talking to me specifically.
Yeah.
But
Oh, then go ahead and beat him up. I don't care.
I'm not the pastor here, but I'm just saying that I feel like if I was, I would have a really hard time not blending it. And maybe that's why I shouldn't be a pastor.
Well, no, I think as pastors, we have to be aware, and there's a danger in saying we're the church and we're not going to even touch this. I mean,
Right.
There's a danger in that as well. But I just think we have to be careful that we don't cross the line. And I'm speaking from experience. It's really difficult to do that without putting your own political spin on stuff.
It is.
And as a pastor, I do not have the right to influence you politically. We can talk about all kinds of things, but my words when I'm in that pulpit carry a different weight than just talking in the parking lot. And I have got, because, I represent a relationship with God to a lot of people. And we can debate whether that's should or should not, but that happens. And so I have to be very, very measured in how I would go about doing that. So what we're doing is we're going on with what we had planned for Sunday. But we are going to have a special time of prayer for folks. So
that's a great idea.
That's my opinion.
It is.
I do like the idea of speaking out on the blending part in terms of making something an idol, because you can, there was an article from Russell Moore where he kind of compared like people needing to speak out about people making politics, or even like you said, the country or something like that, an idol. And he compared it to Aaron. He didn't really want the golden calf set up. He didn't want the idol set up, but he kind of sat by while people did it. So I think we as Christians,
we could have a whole episode on
idols we can make.
The idols that we can make.
We should.
Pastors' silence in allowing idols to be created, whether they participated in that or not. So I will.
Yeah, and I think that is important to remember, that the church should not be synonymous with your, government, politics, anything like that. It kind of reminds me of and the church will withstand it, because God promised that the gates of Hades will never overcome the church that he has created. It reminds me of a probably apocryphal story of Napoleon kidnapping the Pope, to where he says, I'm going to destroy the church. And the Pope laughs and goes, the Christians have been trying to do that for the past, 1600 years, and we still haven't succeeded. And I think there's, it's funny, but there's also some truth to that. Like that the church that Christ established is still going to withstand this. It's not the end of the church. So we should still have our hope to kind of bring it back to that.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I completely agree. Okay. I guess that is our hope-filled message for 2020 and going into 2021. So segue. Appalachian Liturgy Top 5 Debate. To our top 5. So Nate came up with a top 5 again. We are doing the top 5 shows of 2020 that we watched in 2020. Doesn't have to be produced or released in 2020, but that we watched in 2020. Nate, you get to go first.
Okay. Well, I had one that didn't quite make my top 5. It was a documentary series on Netflix about the Challenger called Final Flight. That was just outside of my top 5. That I think it's 3 or 4 episodes, but it was phenomenal. I remember the Challenger explosion back in the 80s, but I didn't know all these details. So that was just outside of my top 5. Number 5 for me was Designated Survivor. I had never watched. I think I'd watched a couple of episodes when it was on ABC, but I'm almost done with it. But I'm still going to count it for 2020. I really just thought that was a good show. Number 4 for me was a show called The Good Place that I had never watched, and I don't know how I missed that, because it's really funny. I know
It is funny.
I'm not sure, that there are a lot of real spiritual implications in that one. I don't recommend.
It's
you
not
watch
theologically
that.
accurate. What?
Well, I mean,
I thought our credit score was going to get us in heaven.
it could, and if you have a lot of good deeds, just the way that Paul taught. But anyway, I really liked the show. I thought it was cute and well written. And when I watch TV, I just want to be entertained. Number 3 for me was a documentary series on ESPN called The Last Dance
Oh yeah, it was great.
about the 1998 Bulls. Really just confirming what everybody knows, whether they admit it or not. Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time. People would say
Controversy.
LeBron James, but LeBron James quits when his team doesn't win. So anyway, it's Michael Jordan, and that confirmed it for me. And that's the
My
end of the
favorite
conversation.
part of that show was when they were talking about the competitiveness of Michael Jordan, and he is flipping nickels to see who can get them closest to the wall. That was my favorite.
And then
He's betting
measuring.
money when he lost like the first time. He's like, I got to do it again.
So I will say that I was a huge Bulls fan when I was a kid. I had all kinds of Bulls stuff. Loved the Bulls.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I knew who Michael Jordan was because at least, or maybe I didn't care as a kid, because if the Bulls were playing now and Michael Jordan was playing now, I think I would hate him because just that documentary, he gives off the Tom Brady vibe that I absolutely despise. And just because he knows he's the best. He knows he's the best. And so I wouldn't be a fan anymore. And that's my problem with The Last Dance.
Well, that's fine.
But when you compare him to the Pistons, he's less cocky. So it
That's
works
true.
out.
That is true. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say he was my favorite player of all time.
Yeah.
He's the greatest of all time.
Right.
Anyway, that's how I feel about it. My number 2 favorite series from this past year was Cobra Kai. It just appeared on Netflix when they bought it from YouTube. And then season 3 came out January 1st, but we're still going to count it. Such a good show. Takes you right back to the 80s or the karate. See, the 80s was a decade, Bowling and Stacy, when they had all kinds of good movies.
Okay. I've watched the Karate Kid movies. You don't have to act like that I'm so young.
But Cobra Kai really captures the spirit of the movies. So good and so well done. And my number 1 favorite show that I watched last year, will come as no shock, is The Mandalorian. I thought season 2 blew it out of the water. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan anyway, but it kind of pulled me back. Suddenly I was 5 again. So that's my top 5.
All right, who's next?
Let me
You
go
are.
because Nate basically has more than half my list.
Okay, go Bowling.
So one he doesn't have at 5. I did finish watching Veep last year, which is a pretty hilarious show too. If you haven't watched it, yeah. I had at number 4 The Good Place. Finally started watching it last year and actually basically caught up, but then haven't watched any of whatever the latest season is because that's how I do with shows. I'm bad on it. The Last Dance, and at number 3.
Look at that.
Our number 1's going to be different here, but number 2, The Mandalorian, obviously. Number 1, had to bring it in with the most stereotypical 2020 show, Tiger King.
Oh, I thought about that.
Oh,
It is definitely not the highest quality of them, but it's the most 2020 of all the shows. So
Yeah,
it
I
has to
didn't
be number
finish
1.
Tiger King.
That's fair.
All right, I'll go.
Go ahead.
So I had 2 honorable mentions. The Rot Stuff was an honorable mention. It's a TV show based on the Apollo astronauts and their journey to become astronauts. So, and then my other honorable mention was All Rise, which is a legal drama right now. I think it's on CBS, but anyway, so those are my 2 honorable mentions. So at number 5, a comedy, Bob Hart's Abishola, which is hilarious. So the first one I watched, I was like, but it's pretty funny. So number 4, I'm a little girly in a couple of these. 4 was Virgin River, which I just found out tonight that my husband is watching them after I fall asleep so he can catch up with me so we can watch it together.
Nice.
My number 3 was Picard.
Very good.
I haven't gotten to watch that.
It's great.
Yeah.
I don't have CBS All Access, so I just.
Okay, my number 2 was Cobra Kai.
Yes.
Yes.
And my number one was Mandalorian.
Yep, Mandalorian's on every list. I can guarantee you that.
Shocking.
I
Shocking.
know, right?
I mean, I like a good sci-fi, don't you, Brooke?
Yes, but Abby would say it's not sci-fi.
Okay. I was wondering if she's going to push back.
I was hoping she would. Okay. All right. On to my list. So my number 5 is something that probably Nate may have watched, or at least would like to watch, but I don't think anybody else would. And that is the Undertaker's documentary, The Last Ride.
It was on my honorable mentions.
Yes, and that was my number 5. It is really, really good. It's amazing. If you're a wrestling fan, you want to see that. So that was my number 5. My number 4 is the Tiger King. That started out 2020. Really, it was in the winter, I think, of 2020, and that was before everything went crazy. The only crazy thing about the winter was Tiger King, I guess. My number 3 was Star Trek Discovery.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think I watched all the seasons in 2020 of Star Trek Discovery, and I love it. I forgot about Picard. I don't know why I forgot about Picard having Star Trek here. But Picard's definitely an honorable mention. Mandalorian's my number 2, and my number 1 is Cobra Kai.
Oh.
And yes, I actually, because I watched all 3 seasons in 2020, I just finished season 3. It's fresh on my mind. That's the reason why it got the bump over Mandalorian. And I love Cobra Kai. It's so good. So yeah, that is my list. All right.
I think this might be an easy top 5.
I think it is. I've already got 4 of them down, and that is Cobra Kai, The Good Place, The Mandalorian, and The Last Dance. It was all duplicates.
Mm-hmm.
And
wait, which ones again?
Cobra Kai.
Okay.
Good Place.
Okay.
That was duplicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Mandalorian, everybody had, and The Last Dance.
It was a good one too.
Several of you all had Star Trek shows. You could put the new Star
That's
Trek.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Let's put Star Trek.
I would petition too of dropping The Good Place and putting Tiger King.
It was on a couple of lists.
That's a good point. There
More
it's
2020.
tied, really.
Yeah.
And it is 2020. It encompasses 2020. And we got the slogan "Cool Cats and Kittens," and that's just great. So
kittens.
let's everybody agree.
Agree.
All right, so that's what we're
Guys
gonna do.
have it.
Yep. So our list is Cobra Kai, Tiger King, Mandalorian, The Last Dance, and Star Trek.
Nice.
I don't think you can argue with that.
That's a
Nope.
good list. That's a very good
Really
list.
solid.
All right. So we can conclude. This has been a really good, hope-filled episode. That's exactly what I was hoping we could do. Pun intended. I do want to finish it up with some scripture. So 1 Peter 1:3, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. By his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And I think that's where our hope has to lie in everything.
Amen.
In the resurrection. Amen. All right. Thank you so much, Nate, for joining us again.
I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, you're going to be a reoccurring character in our drama or comedy, I guess.
That sounds good.
The Greek version of the comic.
Yeah. All right. Well, peace be to you and good night.
Good night.
Bye.